The champagne flute slipped from my fingers as Deacon grabbed the microphone, his words echoing through the downtown bistro like a death sentence. "We never really stopped, baby." The room plunged into absolute silence. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me, their stares burning through my carefully constructed facade. I'm Evanthe Corin, 34 years old, and until that moment, I thought I had everything under control. My husband Simon sat beside me, his face draining of all colour, as Deacon swayed drunkenly on the small stage we'd rented for my birthday celebration. The microphone feedback screeched through the speakers, but nothing could cut through the deafening quiet that followed those 5 devastating words. "Deacon, you're drunk," I laughed nervously, my voice cracking as I tried to salvage the situation. "Everyone knows you say crazy things when you've had too much wine." But the damage was done. Simon's chair scraped against the hardwood floor as he stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. His dark eyes, usually so warm and understanding, had turned ice cold. Without a single word, he walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. "Simon, wait," I called after him, but he didn't turn around. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. My 7-year-old daughter Leela tugged at my dress, her voice small and frightened. "Mommy, why did Daddy leave? Why is everyone staring at us?" I looked around the room at our friends, family, and coworkers. My mother-in-law Karen sat rigidly in her chair, her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. My father-in-law Harold looked confused and uncomfortable, glancing between me and the door where Simon had disappeared. My sister Phoebe reached across the table to squeeze my hand, but even she seemed uncertain. Deacon had stumbled off the stage, apparently oblivious to the chaos he'd created. He approached our table with that same cocky grin that had attracted me to him 15 years ago, back when we were college sweethearts. "Great party, Ev," he slurred, completely missing the tension in the air. "Just like old times, right?" "Deacon, you need to leave," I hissed, acutely aware of everyone still watching us. "You've had too much to drink." "Come on, don't be like that," he said, reaching for my shoulder. "We were just having fun, like we always do." Karen stood up abruptly, her chair nearly toppling over. "I think this party is over," she announced coldly, gathering her purse. "Harold, we're leaving." "Now, hold on, Karen," Harold said, trying to play peacemaker. "Maybe we should—" "No," she cut him off sharply. "I won't sit here and watch this spectacle." She looked directly at me, her eyes filled with disgust. "Simon is a good man. He deserves better than this." One by one, our guests began to leave. Whispered conversations buzzed around the room as people gathered their coats and purses. I caught fragments of their words: affair, shameless, poor Simon. Each comment felt like a physical blow. My coworker Jennifer from HR approached hesitantly. "Evanthe, maybe you should go home and talk to Simon. This doesn't look good." "There's nothing to talk about," I insisted, my voice rising defensively. "Deacon is just an old friend. Simon knows that. Everyone knows that." But even as I said the words, I could see the doubt in Jennifer's eyes. She'd been at enough office parties to know the difference between friendly banter and something more intimate. She'd seen the way Deacon and I laughed together, the way we'd slip away for innocent conversations. Phoebe finally spoke up, her voice uncertain. "Ev, maybe we should call it tonight. Lila looks tired, and you need to go home to Simon." I looked down at my daughter, who was indeed exhausted and confused. Her big brown eyes, so much like Simon's, were filled with tears she was trying hard not to shed. "Okay," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's go home." As we gathered our things, Deacon stumbled over again. "Hey, where's everyone going? The night's still young." "Go home, Deacon," I said firmly. "Sleep it off." He looked genuinely confused. "What's wrong? Did I say something?" The remaining guests exchanged glances. Even in his drunken state, Deacon seemed to realize he'd crossed a line. He shrugged and wandered toward the bar, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of his careless words. The drive home was torture. Lila fell asleep in her car seat, but I could feel the weight of what had happened pressing down on me like a physical force. My phone buzzed with text messages, probably from people who'd been at the party, wanting to know what was really going on between Deacon and me. I couldn't answer those messages because I wasn't ready to face the truth myself. Yes, Deacon and I had been spending time together. Yes, we'd shared some intimate conversations and maybe a few kisses, but it wasn't a real affair. It was just companionship. Simon had been so distant lately, so focused on work and his projects. Deacon made me feel alive again, made me laugh the way Simon used to. But as I pulled into our driveway, seeing Simon's car already there, I realized that my rationalizations wouldn't matter now. The secret was out, broadcast to everyone we knew in the most humiliating way possible. The house was dark except for a single light in Simon's home office. I carried Lila inside and tucked her into bed, her sleepy voice asking again why Daddy had left the party early. Daddy just wasn't feeling well, I whispered, kissing her forehead. Everything will be fine in the morning. But I knew that was a lie. I found Simon in the kitchen at midnight, sitting at our breakfast table with a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. He didn't look up when I entered the room, his attention focused on something I couldn't see. "Simon, we need to talk," I began, trying to keep my voice steady and reasonable. "What happened tonight?" "What happened tonight," he interrupted quietly, "was that your boyfriend announced to 40 people that you two never stopped seeing each other." His voice was calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd been shouting. "He's not my boyfriend," I protested, moving closer to the table. "Deacon was drunk. You know how he gets when he's had too much wine. He says stupid things that don't mean anything." Simon finally looked up at me, and I was shocked by the exhaustion in his eyes. "Evanthe, do you think I'm stupid?" "Of course not. I just think you're overreacting to—" "Am I overreacting?" He stood up slowly, and I noticed he was holding a small notebook. Because I've been paying attention, even when I thought I was being paranoid, even when I told myself I was imagining things. My heart began to race. "What do you mean?" He opened the notebook, and I could see pages of handwritten notes in his careful script. "Tuesday, March 15th. You said you were working late, but your office was dark when I drove by at 9 p.m. Wednesday, March 23rd. Unexplained charge for dinner at Romano's, the restaurant you said you'd never been to. Thursday, April 7th. Deacon's red Honda was parked in our driveway when I came home for lunch, but you said you were alone." Each entry felt like a punch to the stomach. I'd been so careful, or so I thought. But Simon was methodical by nature. It was what made him such a good IT project manager. Of course, he'd been documenting everything. "Simon, you're being paranoid," I said, falling back on the strategy that had worked before. Those things all have innocent explanations. The office cleaning crew turns off lights when they're done. Maybe I used the wrong credit card by mistake. And Deacon stops by sometimes to chat. We're old friends. "Old friends," he repeated flatly. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes, that's exactly what I call it because that's what it is." I was getting angry now, which was easier than dealing with the guilt. "I can't believe you've been spying on me, keeping some kind of secret dossier. What kind of marriage is that?" Simon closed the notebook and looked at me with something that might have been pity. I kept hoping I was wrong. I kept telling myself that the woman I married wouldn't lie to my face while she was having an affair. "I'm not having an affair." The words came out louder than I intended, and I glanced toward the stairs, hoping I hadn't woken Lila. "Deacon and I are friends. We talk, we laugh, we enjoy each other's company. Since when is that a crime?" "Since you started lying about it," Simon said quietly. "Since you started sneaking around. Since you started making me feel crazy for noticing that my wife was pulling away from me and our daughter." That stung because it was partially true. I had been pulling away, but not because I didn't love them. I just needed something more, something that reminded me of who I used to be before I became just another suburban wife and mother. I haven't pulled away from Leela, I said defensively. Haven't you? When was the last time you helped her with homework instead of rushing out for one of your mysterious errands? When was the last time you put her to bed instead of leaving it to me because you had to take an important phone call? I wanted to argue, but the examples were piling up in my mind. All those times I'd chosen to text Deacon instead of reading Lila a bedtime story. All those evenings I'd claimed to be tired when really I was distracted, thinking about my next conversation with Deacon. I'm a good mother, I said weakly. You were, Simon agreed. But lately, it feels like you're somewhere else even when you're here. I sat down across from him, trying a different approach. Simon, I know things have been difficult between us lately. We've both been stressed with work and Lila's school and everything else. Maybe I did lean on Deacon's friendship more than I should have. But that doesn't mean I'm having an affair. For a moment, I thought I saw hope flicker in his eyes. Simon wanted to believe me. I could see that. He loved me, and love makes people want to accept explanations that might not make perfect sense. So you're saying Deacon was just drunk and talking nonsense? He asked. Exactly, I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. You know how Deacon is. He's always been dramatic, always exaggerating things. We've been friends since college, and yes, we dated back then, but that was 15 years ago. We're different people now. Simon didn't pull his hand away, but he didn't squeeze mine either. Then you won't mind if I ask you to stop seeing him? The request hit me like a slap. Stop seeing Deacon. Stop having those conversations that made me feel young and interesting again. Stop having someone in my life who remembered the person I used to be before I became consumed with mortgage payments and parent-teacher conferences. That seems extreme, I said carefully. I mean, we work in the same building. We're bound to run into each other. I'm not talking about running into him at work. I'm talking about the phone calls, the coffee dates, the dinners when you're supposedly working late. Simon, you're asking me to give up a friendship because you're feeling insecure. His hand went rigid under mine. I'm asking my wife to prioritize our marriage over her relationship with another man. When he put it that way, it sounded reasonable, but the thought of cutting Deacon out of my life completely made me feel panicky. Deacon understood me in ways that Simon didn't. Deacon thought I was funny and smart and interesting. With Deacon, I didn't have to worry about grocery lists and school permission slips and all the mundane details that seemed to consume my life with Simon. I'll think about it, I said finally. Simon pulled his hand away. You'll think about it. Yes, this is a big decision, and I don't want to make it when we're both emotional and tired. He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact instant when hope died in his eyes. Okay, Evanthe, you think about it. He stood up and headed toward the stairs, then paused. I'll be sleeping in the guest room tonight. Simon, that's not necessary. Yes, it is, he said without turning around. It really is. After he left, I sat alone in the kitchen, trying to process everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Phoebe. Are you okay? Call me if you need to talk. Another message from Deacon. Did I say something wrong tonight? Everyone got weird all of a sudden. I deleted both messages without responding. I needed time to think, to figure out how to fix this mess without giving up the one thing in my life that made me happy. But as I finally headed upstairs, I could hear Simon moving around in the guest room, and I realized that some damage might already be irreversible. The whispers started the moment I walked into the office Monday morning. Jennifer from accounting looked up from her coffee, caught my eye, then quickly looked away. Brad from marketing stopped mid-sentence in his conversation with two other colleagues when he saw me approaching. I'd been dreading this moment since Saturday night, but I'd hoped that maybe people would forget about Deacon's drunken outburst. I should have known better. Office gossip spreads faster than wildfire, especially when it involves someone from HR who's supposed to be above reproach. Good morning, everyone, I said brightly, trying to project confidence as I settled at my desk. I hope you all recovered from Saturday night. That was quite a party. The forced cheerfulness in my voice sounded fake, even to me. Jennifer managed a weak smile, but I could see the questions in her eyes. She'd been at the party with her husband, sitting close enough to hear everything. My phone rang, providing a welcome distraction. Evanthe Corin, Human Resources. Ev, thank God you answered. It was Phoebe, calling from her real estate office across town. I've been worried sick about you. How are things with Simon? I glanced around the office, making sure no one was listening. Can I call you back? I'm at work. Of course, but I wanted you to know that I think Simon is being completely unreasonable. So what if Deacon had too much to drink and said something stupid? That doesn't mean anything happened between you two. Her words were exactly what I needed to hear, but I noticed she phrased it as a question rather than a statement. Even Phoebe, my biggest supporter, had doubts. We'll talk later, I said quietly, ending the call. The morning dragged by with uncomfortable encounters and half-finished conversations. People would start to approach my desk, then think better of it and turn away. The few who did speak to me were overly polite, the way people act around someone who's been diagnosed with a terminal illness. At lunch, I decided to drive over to Karen and Harold's house. Sunday family dinners had been a tradition for years, and I'd missed yesterday's gathering because Simon and I were barely speaking. I thought maybe I could smooth things over with his parents, explain what had really happened. Karen answered the door with the expression I'd never seen before, cold and unwelcoming. In 8 years of marriage, she'd always been warm to me, treating me like the daughter she'd never had. Evanthe, she said stiffly, I wasn't expecting you. I know I should have called first, I said, trying to sound casual. I just wanted to talk to you about what happened Saturday night. I think there's been a misunderstanding. She didn't invite me in. I don't think there's been any misunderstanding at all. Karen, please. Can we at least sit down and discuss this like adults? After a long pause, she stepped aside to let me enter. The house felt different, colder somehow. Harold was in his usual chair, reading the newspaper, but he barely looked up when I came in. Harold, I said warmly, how are you feeling? I heard you had that doctor's appointment last week. I'm fine, he replied curtly, not lowering his newspaper. The man who usually greeted me with hugs and questions about Lila couldn't even make eye contact. Karen sat down across from me, her posture rigid. What did you want to discuss? I wanted to explain what really happened at my birthday party, I began. Deacon had too much to drink and said something inappropriate, but it didn't mean anything. Simon is taking it completely out of context. Is he? Karen's voice was sharp, because from where I was sitting, it looked like Deacon was very comfortable making public declarations about your relationship. We don't have a relationship, I insisted. We're friends. We've been friends since college, long before I even met Simon. Friends don't usually announce that they never stopped, Harold said from behind his newspaper. That implies something ongoing. I was surprised to hear him speak. Harold usually stayed out of family conflicts. The fact that he was weighing in meant the situation was worse than I'd thought. Harold, you know Deacon. You've met him before. He's always been dramatic, always exaggerating things for effect. He probably meant that we never stopped being friends. Karen leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Evanthe, do you think we're stupid? Do you think we haven't noticed the changes in you over the past few months? The way you're always on your phone, the way you've been distant with Lila, the way you light up when certain people call. I don't know what you mean, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I mean that you've been having an affair, Karen said bluntly. And now that it's been exposed in front of everyone we know, you're trying to convince us that we didn't see what we saw. The word affair hung in the air like an accusation. I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment and anger. I am not having an affair, I said firmly. I resent the implication. Then prove it, Karen challenged. Show us your phone. Let us see these innocent conversations you've been having with Deacon. My stomach dropped. I deleted most of the messages between Deacon and me, but there were still some that could be misinterpreted. Texts about meeting for coffee, inside jokes, comments about how much we enjoyed spending time together. "I'm not going to show you my phone," I said. "I'm a grown woman, and I don't need to prove my innocence to anyone." "You need to prove it to your husband," Harold said quietly, finally lowering his newspaper. "And to your daughter." The mention of Lila hit me hard. "Leela has nothing to do with this." "Doesn't she?" Karen asked. "Because she called here yesterday, crying because Mommy and Daddy were fighting, and she didn't understand why. She asked me if you and Simon were going to get divorced, like her friend Emma's parents." I felt tears stinging my eyes. I hadn't realized that Lila was picking up on so much tension. "Simon and I are not getting divorced," I said. "We're just going through a rough patch." "A rough patch caused by your inappropriate relationship with another man," Karen said. "Evanthe, I've watched you with my son for 8 years. I've seen how much he loves you, how hard he tries to make you happy, and I've watched you take that love for granted while you chase after someone who clearly doesn't respect your marriage." "That's not fair," I protested. "You don't understand the situation." "I understand that my son is devastated," Karen said, her voice rising. "I understand that my granddaughter is confused and scared, and I understand that instead of taking responsibility for your actions, you're here trying to convince us that we're all imagining things." I stood up, my own anger finally boiling over. "I came here hoping we could have a reasonable conversation, but I can see that's impossible. You've already made up your minds." "We've made up our minds based on what we've observed," Harold said, "and what we observed Saturday night was a woman who's been lying to her family." "I haven't been lying to anyone," I said, heading toward the door. "But I can see there's no point in trying to explain anything to you." As I reached for the door handle, Karen called after me. "Evanthe, if you care about Simon and Lila at all, you'll end whatever this is with Deacon before you destroy your family completely." I left without responding, but her words followed me to the car. As I drove back to work, I tried to call Phoebe for moral support. "Thank God," she said when she answered. "I've been thinking about you all morning. How did it go with Simon's parents?" "Terribly," I admitted. "They're convinced I'm having an affair. They won't listen to reason." "Well, they're probably just protecting Simon," Phoebe said diplomatically. "You know how parents can be when they think their child is being hurt." "But I'm not hurting Simon," I insisted. "Not intentionally, anyway. I just need him to understand that I can have male friends without it meaning anything sinister." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ev, can I ask you something? And I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "Are you attracted to Deacon?" The question caught me off guard. I mean, he's an attractive man, but that doesn't mean—" "That's not what I asked," Phoebe interrupted gently. "I asked if you're attracted to him." I thought about Deacon's smile, the way he made me laugh, the flutter of excitement I felt when his name appeared on my phone. "Maybe a little," I admitted. "But attraction doesn't equal action. I've never done anything inappropriate." "What about the way you two were looking at each other Saturday night? Even before he grabbed the microphone, people were talking about the chemistry between you." "People see what they want to see," I said defensively. "If two people of the opposite sex are friends, everyone assumes there must be something romantic going on." "Ev, I love you, and I want to support you, but I think you need to be honest with yourself about what's really happening here. Maybe you haven't physically cheated on Simon, but emotional affairs can be just as damaging to a marriage." I ended the call feeling more confused and isolated than ever. Even Phoebe, who'd always been in my corner, was starting to question my version of events. That afternoon, I decided to text Deacon. I needed to talk to someone who understood my perspective, someone who wouldn't judge me or make me feel like a terrible person for wanting a little happiness in my life. "Can we talk?" I typed. "This whole situation is getting out of hand." His response came back quickly. "Meet me at our usual place at 5. Our usual place was a coffee shop downtown where we'd been meeting for months. I'd never thought of it as anything inappropriate, just two friends grabbing coffee and conversation. But now, reading those words, I wondered if other people would see it differently. I arrived at the coffee shop to find Deacon already waiting, looking uncharacteristically serious. Usually he greeted me with that charming smile that made me forget about all my responsibilities and worries. Today he seemed anxious. "Ev, I'm really sorry about Saturday night," he said as soon as I sat down. "I had way too much to drink, and I said something stupid. I hope I didn't cause problems for you." "You don't remember what you said?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not really. Something about us being friends forever. I don't know. People are acting like I announced we were running away together or something." I stared at him, realizing that he genuinely didn't understand the impact of his words. "Deacon, you grabbed the microphone and told everyone that we never really stopped. In front of my husband, my daughter, my in-laws, and 40 other people." His face went pale. "Oh, shit. Ev, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... I was drunk and I was just feeling nostalgic about our college days." "Well, everyone thinks we're having an affair now," I said quietly. "Are we?" he asked, looking directly into my eyes. The question hung between us like a challenge. Were we having an affair? We'd never slept together, never even kissed since I'd been married, but we'd shared intimate conversations, emotional connections, and yes, there had been attraction simmering under the surface. "No," I said finally. "We're friends." "Right," he agreed, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced either. "Deacon, I need you to help me fix this. If anyone asks you about our relationship, you need to make it clear that we're just friends, nothing more." He nodded, but I could see reluctance in his eyes. "Of course, whatever you need." As I drove home that evening, I felt like I was living in a nightmare that kept getting worse. My phone had been buzzing all day with texts from friends and coworkers, all wanting to know what was really going on. The gossip mill was in full swing, and I was the main attraction. When I walked into the house, I found Simon in the living room with Lila, helping her with a school project. They looked up when I entered, and I was struck by how much they looked alike. The same dark hair, the same serious expressions. "Hi, Mummy," Lila said, but her voice was subdued. "Daddy's helping me make a family tree for school." I looked at the poster board spread out on the coffee table, covered with photos of our relatives. It was a visual representation of everything I stood to lose if I couldn't find a way to fix this situation. "That looks wonderful, sweetheart," I said, sitting down beside them. "Can I help?" "We're almost done," Simon said quietly. "Lila, why don't you go wash up for dinner?" After Lila left the room, Simon and I sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. "I heard you went to see my parents today." "Yes," I admitted. I wanted to explain what happened Saturday night. "And how did that go?" "Not well. They've already decided I'm guilty of something I didn't do." Simon looked at me with those tired eyes again. "Evanthe, I found something today that I think you should see." My heart started racing. "What kind of something?" He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was a photo from my social media account, a picture I'd posted 3 weeks ago of Deacon and me at a restaurant, both of us laughing at something he'd said. The caption read, "Great conversation with an old friend. Some people just get you, you know?" I remembered posting it without thinking, but seeing it now through Simon's eyes, I realized how it must have looked to him. "Ev, this doesn't look like just friends to me," he said quietly. "The way you're looking at him, the way you're leaning toward him, and that caption, some people just get you. What does that mean?" I wanted to explain that Deacon did get me in ways that Simon sometimes didn't, but I could see that would only make things worse. "It doesn't mean anything," I said weakly. "It was just a casual comment." Simon put his phone away and looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I've been thinking about this all day, and I've made a decision. I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you having an affair with Deacon?" The moment felt like a crossroads. I could tell him the truth, that while we hadn't been physical, there had been an emotional connection that probably crossed some lines. Or I could stick to my story and hope that somehow we could move past this. "No," I said, looking him in the eyes. I am not having an affair with Deacon. He nodded slowly, but I could see that he didn't believe me. Okay, Evanthe, if that's your final answer. Something in his tone made me nervous. What do you mean, final answer? I mean that I've given you multiple opportunities to be honest with me, and you've chosen to stick to your story. So now I'm going to find out the truth for myself. Simon, what are you talking about? He stood up and headed toward the stairs. You'll find out soon enough. That night, as I lay alone in our bed while Simon slept in the guest room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. But I was too deep into my denials to change course now. I had no idea that Simon had already started building a case against me, methodically collecting evidence that would soon make my carefully constructed lies impossible to maintain. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail, while I was getting Lila ready for school. Simon signed for it with an expression I couldn't read, then disappeared into his office without a word. I'd been walking on eggshells for 2 weeks since our last conversation, trying to act normal while feeling like I was living under a microscope. Simon had become eerily calm, which was somehow more unsettling than if he'd been angry. He spoke to me politely about household matters and Lila's schedule, but there was a distance between us that felt unbridgeable. "Mummy, you're not listening," Lila complained as I absently handed her the wrong backpack. "Sorry, sweetie," I said, switching it for her school bag. "I'm just distracted this morning." "Are you and Daddy still fighting?" she asked, her voice small and worried. "We're not fighting," I assured her, though we weren't exactly talking either. "Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. The gossip at work had died down to a dull roar, but I could still feel people watching me, speculating about my marriage. My friendship with Deacon had become strained since our coffee shop conversation. He seemed uncomfortable around me now, as if he'd finally realized the complexity of the situation he'd created. After dropping Lila at school, I decided to swing by Deacon's apartment. I needed to talk to someone who understood my perspective, and despite everything, he was still the only person who made me feel like myself, instead of just another suburban wife drowning in responsibilities. Deacon answered the door in his pajamas, looking surprised to see me. "Ev? What are you doing here?" "I just needed to talk to someone," I said, suddenly feeling foolish. "Can I come in?" He hesitated, glancing around nervously. "I don't know if that's such a good idea. I mean, after everything that's happened." "Deacon, we're friends," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. "Since when do we have to worry about appearances?" His apartment was messier than usual, with empty beer bottles on the coffee table and clothes scattered around the living room. It looked like he'd been having his own rough couple of weeks. "Look, Ev, I've been thinking about what happened at your party," he said, closing the door reluctantly. "Maybe we should cool it for a while. You know, give Simon time to calm down." The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. "Cool it? Deacon, you're one of my best friends. I'm not going to let Simon's jealousy destroy our friendship." "It's not about his jealousy," Deacon said, running his hands through his hair. "It's about the fact that I might have feelings for you that go beyond friendship." The admission hung in the air between us. I'd suspected as much, but hearing him say it out loud made everything more complicated. "Deacon," I started, not sure how to respond. "I know you're married," he continued quickly. "I know you love Simon and Lila, but I also know that there's something between us, something that's been building for months, and I think that's what people saw at your party." I wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. There had been something building between us, something that made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. "What are you saying?" I asked quietly. "I'm saying maybe we should be honest about what this is instead of pretending it's just friendship." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Simon. "We need to talk when you get home. It's important." The message sent a chill through me. Simon never texted during work hours unless something was wrong. "I have to go," I told Deacon, gathering my purse. "Ev, wait. We need to figure this out." There's nothing to figure out, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. I'm married. I have a daughter. This conversation never happened. I left Deacon's apartment feeling more confused than ever. Part of me wanted to explore whatever was happening between us, but the rational part of my brain knew it would destroy everything I'd built with Simon. When I got home that evening, I found Simon in the kitchen with a manila folder spread out in front of him. His laptop was open, and I could see what looked like official documents on the screen. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Sit down, Evanthe," he said without looking up. "We need to have a serious conversation." I sat across from him, my heart pounding. The folder contained printed emails, bank statements, and what looked like phone records. "Simon, what is this?" He finally looked at me, and I was shocked by the coldness in his eyes. "This is the truth you've been hiding from me for months." He pulled out a stack of papers and placed them in front of me. They were printouts of text messages between Deacon and me, messages I thought I'd deleted from my phone. "How did you get these?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have a friend who works for the phone company," he said matter-of-factly. "Turns out deleted messages aren't really deleted, they're just hidden from the user interface." I stared at the messages, seeing them through Simon's eyes for the first time. Taken individually, they might have seemed innocent, but together, they painted a picture of an intimate relationship that had been building over months. "Can't wait to see you tonight," read one from Deacon. "These conversations are the best part of my day," read my response. "Simon's working late again. Sometimes I feel like we're roommates instead of husband and wife," read another from me. "Evanthe," Simon said quietly, "I want you to look at these messages and tell me again that you're not having an affair." I felt trapped, cornered by my own words. "Simon, these messages are taken out of context. Deacon and I were just..." "Just what?" he interrupted. "Just sharing intimate details about our marriage. Just meeting in secret. Just lying to me about where you were and who you were with." He pulled out bank statements, reading aloud. "Romano's Restaurant, March 23rd, the day you claimed a desk sandwich. Starbucks on 5th April 10th during your long meeting." Each charge was a nail in my coffin. Then the photograph. "Deacon's car in our driveway, March 30th, 2:15 p.m. You said you were homesick, alone." "He brought soup," I whispered. "Just a friend checking on me." "From our kitchen?" Simon asked, voice steady. He'd been investigating for months, turning his meticulous nature against me. He showed social media, months of photos with Deacon, laughing, happy, radiant in ways I hadn't been with Simon. "Look how you glow with him," he said quietly. "When did you last look at me like that?" I had no answer. "I want you to pack a bag," he continued. "Stay somewhere else. I need time." "Simon, no, Lila. I'll explain to our daughter why Mommy lied. You had chances to be honest. You chose secrets instead." As I packed with trembling hands, his words echoed. "You already threw away our marriage." Driving to Phoebe's, I still told myself it was just an innocent friendship gone too far. I refused to see the truth. I didn't yet know Simon was 3 steps ahead, and my consequences were only beginning.